Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Pink Mike Leo Confessions. I am Stephanie Garces, the attorney at Garces Law Firm. As you know, I usually have a guest on this show, but today we're doing things a little bit different. Today, I'm going to be addressing a couple of the most frequently asked questions that I receive whenever I am in a consultation or perhaps someone messages us to try to figure out what is it that we actually do. So I'm hoping to sort of demystify some of the stuff that everyone has questions about. So the first thing is, what is estate planning? We talk a lot about this on the show. It's primarily a big part of what I do at my law firm. But what actually is estate planning? So, the most basic way to explain this is that estate planning is essentially a legal way to leave everything in order regarding your affairs. That means that you make decisions about who's getting what, whether that's money, your house, anything that you own, who's getting it? Is it your kids? Is it your neighbor? Is it your loved ones? Or do you want to donate to a charity? Some people leave their money to charity or to their pets. Yes, that is a thing. So essentially, estate planning is really just a legal way and the most effective way to really protect your assets in the event of an unexpected event like death. Also, it can also be used for in the event that you can't make decisions for yourself, if you became incapacitated, which is not necessarily the same as death, but it still is a way to manage that. So, estate planning does a couple of things for you. It actually can really just protect your assets so that they don't end up in court, and a court does not have to get involved with who's getting what. It basically leaves instructions to your family and to anyone else that you want to leave your things to, again, without court supervision. This is important because a lot of people have this worry, and they worry a lot about what would happen in the event that I'm gone. What would happen if my spouse were to leave this earth before me? What happens if we were to leave at the same time? Those are questions that are addressed in estate planning. So that's really what it is in a big big scheme of things, and it's the most basic way to explain it. Now, one of the questions I get all the time, and is also very common, is people will ask, well, what happens to my property if I die without a will or a trust or any type of estate plan? Now, this is a great question because people will say, well, I always was told, or they'll say, someone told me that I could do it this way and it would work. But 9 out of 10 times, I always tell people that these laws exist for a reason. So when you die without a will and or a trust, essentially your property has no beneficiary. That means that no one automatically has a right to the property. Now, you're probably wondering, well, what if I have kids? Or what if I have a spouse? Don't they get it right away? Well, the answer is it depends. You knew I was going to say that, right? It depends because we don't actually know without really looking into it who is the owner of the property. But let's just say in a world where there is nothing in place, someone dies unexpected and they didn't have a chance to put together something for that property. The property, again, does not have an automatic beneficiary. So that means that the house is up for grabs. But no, it's not really up for grabs. But what I really mean by that is that sometimes if somebody wants to sell the house upon someone passing away that did not leave a will or did not leave a trust, there is a way sometimes to still get around having to go to court, which is a conversation for another day, and it has to be a certain set of facts. But for the most part, if there's property that somebody owns and they pass away without a will or a trust to actually pass that property to their family members, then a court has to intervene. And they usually end up in probate court, which is a whole another court case. And it actually is expensive, it's time consuming, and it's a headache for most people. But it's the legal way to make sure that the property ends up within the family, or it could be sold, depending on who is part of the family and who actually survived the person that passed away. All of those factors matter. So you really end up in not a great place whenever you pass away unexpectedly or expectedly without any sort of estate plan. So that is basically how you handle that. Now, a couple of questions I get always revolve around, um, for example, a title to the property. A lot of people will call about, why should I put my house in a, trust or put together an estate plan as opposed to just doing it with the title. Now, I get calls about this all the time. So why do we care about this? Mainly, the reason why you should do an estate plan instead of putting someone on a title to transfer the property is because the trust, for example, that actually is used as an estate planning tool to transfer that property has more power. It has more protection. And it actually accounts for not only if you pass away, but it also addresses the issue of if you became incapacitated, who can really maneuver the property and handle anything that has to do with it. That's what a trust does, as opposed to title. Title is just a fancy way of saying, I have this piece of paper and I've put my sister on here and she's going to be the owner when I pass away. That might be true, but we don't actually know if that's all that's accounted for in your estate. I mean, your house is one fraction of the things that you probably own. So transferring someone to title does really no justice for what you actually need in the event something happens. So a lot of times it's very recommended, if possible, to try to get something in order. Try to make sure that the house is protected. You could think about putting it in a trust. Super effective, and your family will thank you for it. The reason is because if you put the house in the trust, if you were to pass away, then we already have a plan. The house is already spoken for. You basically left instructions. Also, the same thing happens if you become incapacitated. If you can't make decisions on your own behalf at some point. That's what a living trust does for a house, which adding someone to title doesn't. So there are two different ways to basically handle property, although having an estate plan is the most stronger, the more effective, and long-term, the least expensive option, as opposed to just adding someone to title, because adding someone to title, again, does not foresee some of the other legal ramifications that could come up once you're no longer here. So I hope that answers the question, because it is a good question, and we get a lot of people calling about that. The other question that I get that's actually very common, and actually is one of the ones that I think most people want to know about, is what is probate? What is probate? Why does this exist? What is it? Great question again. Probate is a section of the court where a judge presides over someone's estate. Why does this exist? Well, typically it's because the person that has passed away, for the most part, ends up in probate because they don't have an estate plan in order. They don't have a will. They don't have a trust. Now, probate basically does a couple of things. It actually asks the judge to get involved to help make sure that the assets that you have are taken care of, meaning somebody is in charge, and typically the court has to intervene to make sure to appoint somebody. Or if there is no disagreement and you still have someone in your family that would do it, that works too. But the point is that probate tends to still be a legal process, in that when someone is passed away, the estate has to go and open up a case before the judge. And if there is an executor, because believe it or not, if you have a will, you could still up in probate. You can end up there even though you never intended to. That is one of the biggest myths, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. It's one of the biggest myths in estate planning, that if you have a will, you will not go to probate. And I'm here to tell you that that is not true for the state of Illinois. Now, you're probably wondering, what does probate do and how long does it take? Well, it essentially just gets everything in order. It actually asks permission from the court to oversee the estate, making sure that all the assets are taken care of. If there's people like creditors that the person that passed away owes money to, that also gets taken care of during that. It's very, very long, and it's a cumbersome process. But in our county, Cook County, and I'm saying Cook because that is the one that comes to mind as most popular, although Collar counties are the same, you're looking at an average of about 14 months or longer, depending on if there's any disagreements. And by the way, speaking of disagreements, probate does handle that as well. So if you have a family member that is not in agreement with the way things are being done, or perhaps something is being discussed regarding the house that no one is in agreement with. The people that have outlived the person that has passed away, for example, like children of someone that has passed away, they can go in a probate court and make sure that those things get handled. And again, the court supervising over that. So that is probate in a nutshell. And probate is quite expensive, long, but definitely necessary in the event that you end up there, because there is no estate plan in place. So probate can really be a whole discussion for another day, but that is really what probate is meant to do. Now, one of the biggest questions that we get about probate is, can probate be avoided? Because it kind of sounds like a place where nobody wants to be. Well, like I said, probate is avoidable at all costs if you have the proper estate plan in order. This means you have a trust. This means you have everything in order legally, meaning properly drafted by an attorney, it's valid, it's signed, etc. All the requirements that are required by the state of Illinois. That is a way to avoid probate. However, the estate planning that you put together, it has to be that it encompasses everything. So what does that mean? That means that the estate plan that you put together has to account for all of your assets. That means that everything has been put into the estate plan. It basically creates a wall for everything. I always describe it as a basket. It's like a basket. Everything is in your basket when you pass away. With the proper estate plan, yes, you can avoid probate. However, every so often, we'll see sometimes that someone has, for example, bought a new home, and the home was not mentioned in the estate plan because that person did not update their plan. That is a way that you end up in probate. So basically the takeaway is, if there's any changes that happen economically, or someone changes their mind about how the estate plan is drafted, or perhaps they accumulate more assets, more things, you would want to update your estate plan so that you can avoid probate. So that's the best way to avoid it. And yes, it is avoidable. Another question that we get is, how can my family benefit from an estate plan in general? Now, before I get into this, I just want to say, if you're watching this, I really hope you at least consider the most basic estate plan: a will, a trust, or if it's more complicated, we do more complicated trusts. But the point is that you want to make sure you have something in order, because it actually does benefit your family. So sometimes people will say, well, I don't have a lot. That's not necessarily a reason not to have one, not to have an estate plan, no matter how basic it is. But the reason I'm promoting this is because your family does benefit from having an estate plan. I always say that when you create an estate plan, you're doing it for yourself, but you're actually doing it for your family, for the people that will outlive you. And when something happens to us in this world, because we're all going to end up in the same place, it ends up that the living are the ones that have to deal with everything. So having an estate plan is really a way to plan for your family in the event something unexpected happens. It leaves instructions for your family for the things that you wanted. How did you want to divvy up that money that you have in your account? How did you want to distribute the assets that you have? Perhaps you have a sports car. A lot of people have nice cars they want to leave to someone. Perhaps you want to leave a family heirloom. Maybe you have a ring or something that is from grandma and you want to pass that on. Who do you leave that to? Another really popular thing that estate planning does is it creates a list of guardians that would step in for your children if something were to happen to you and or your spouse or significant other. The reason that's important is because, again, if you have this in order, your family will certainly benefit from it. They'll actually be thanking you when you're no longer here because it's already set in stone that you've picked out the people that are going to be managing your affairs, the people that are going to be raising your children in the event you can't raise them because you're no longer here. Those things matter. And so if that is you, definitely think about estate planning as a way to only benefit your family. It doesn't do anything bad for your family outside of maybe a couple people getting mad because they didn't get what they wanted. But the point is that they're really your wishes and your wishes only. And so it really creates a blueprint for your family of what is going to happen, who gets what, and having children and being able to choose who raises them is a powerful thing. So estate planning really gives power back to the family members that are actually doing this. It gives power back to the parents that have a say of who would raise my kids if something happened to me. As opposed to if you don't have anything, then your family isn't benefited because now a court has to get involved, especially with guardianship. So those are types of things that really do well for your family. It really benefits you. And there's nothing wrong with discussing it with your family because at the end of the day, this does benefit your family in the long run to protect you in the event of an unexpected absence. So there's a number of reasons why estate planning is very important, especially as you progress through your life, whether you're single, you're married, you're starting a family, you're retiring, et cetera, et cetera. No matter what stage in life you are in, an estate plan always, always benefits you and your family. Now, sometimes we'll have a question about the differences. A lot of people these days will go on Google. They've done their own research. They'll say, I did my research and I get the gist of it. But what they have a question about quite often is what is the difference between a will and a trust? And the most basic way to explain this, because it is quite confusing if you start Googling things and a lot of legalese. The basic difference is that a will essentially leaves a letter to the judge, more than anything, and to your family, quite frankly, that says, this is who's going to own my things. This is who's going to be in charge of my affairs. I want to be buried or cremated. If you have any wishes upon that, some people donate their body to science. That's what the will does. You can put that in there. Anything sentimental, you can also, pass on through the will, but it just covers, who's getting what with the personal property. But the trust has a lot more weight, has a lot more power, has a lot more protections than the will. Now, if you were watching earlier, I did mention to you that having a will does not avoid probate. So you could still end up in the probate court spending thousands of dollars just to make sure that the rest of your assets are protected and that we appointed someone to properly manage your affairs, especially when it comes to real estate, your houses or house. Now, the trust does something completely different. It has more protection in that it can actually act as a protection. I told you it's like a basket. Everything's included in there. It transfers upon your death. There are no questions asked, no court supervision, no court involvement. That is the benefit of having the trust, as opposed to the will where you could still end up in probate and the court has to get involved anyway. The trust avoids probate. The trust also transfers the property. I told you earlier that there is no automatic beneficiary to real estate. So the trust actually moves the property however you desired it to be moved upon your death. So that is a big difference between a trust and a will. And again, with a proper estate plan in order, everything regarding probate is avoided with a trust, which is very different and in contrast to a will. That is the biggest difference in a nutshell. Now, another question that we get a lot is about the house and assets. So, what happens if I do not have family to leave assets to? That is a great question because not everyone has a family to leave something to. Well, you can certainly still put an estate plan together, but we would actually dive into that and think about your options. Some people may choose to leave their assets to a charity. That's actually very popular. A lot of people will have a charity that is near and dear to their heart. So they'll make sure to leave it to the specific charity of their choice. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have to do that. Plenty of people will leave it to a family member that's maybe, or I should say, maybe not a family member, but perhaps a family friend, someone that is just a friend to them in general, doesn't have to be related to them. You can really leave your assets to anyone that you wish. Now, you're probably wondering, well, who would want to leave it with some stranger? Well, I didn't say stranger, but I'm definitely saying someone that's not related to you. So I just want to make sure I make the distinction there. You can really leave your assets however you wish, but without a plan, your assets actually are worse off because you don't have anyone. Well, technically, family members, for example, that you could leave it to. And so you certainly don't want it to end up with someone who's a far, 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 far distant cousin who you've never met. So usually when we're talking about leaving assets, but you don't have family, well, we can always explore your options. And usually during a consultation, we talk about that. There are a number of options you can do regarding that sense of facts. So those sort of facts are basically something that we talk about during that time. Now, I should also mention that same thing if you were to leave this earth, I should say, without any estate planning. You don't have family. Again, you do have to end up in probate, and you don't want to end up there. If you can avoid it, I certainly would. By the way, probate in general is expensive, as I mentioned, and a lot of times the attorneys get paid out of the estate itself, if possible. If there are no assets or if no one else is willing to pay for the services and the court fees, there is a way to do it otherwise, but it's still expensive, and if you can avoid it, you should. Now, the best question I get, and one of my favorites, is when should I set up my estate plan? Now, that is a great question because it's one of the most common misconceptions that you should only create an estate plan once you have a family, once you've gotten married, once you've reached a certain level of economic status. And I can tell you for sure that is not the case. I always say you want to do it as soon as possible. If you're watching this video, you're watching everything that we're talking about, you don't have anything in place, there's no better time than the present. The reason for this is because you never know when things are going to happen. You never know if you were to have an accident and can't make decisions for yourself, because as you know, you can only enter into estate plans and do all of these paperwork that we're talking about while you're living and while you're well, meaning you can make decisions on your behalf. So if you're healthy and you're able to make decisions correctly without any assistance now, and you don't have anything in place, there's no reason not to wait. There's no reason to wait. Waiting really doesn't do anything other than create more worry. And so I always say having an estate plan in order gives you peace of mind. It gives you peace of mind until you actually need it, until it actually becomes something that has to be reviewed. And usually that's when there's been a change in the life circumstances, or someone is trying to make sure that they can follow the instructions that you left them. So in general, you should certainly not wait. You should do it as soon as you can. And there's no reason why you would want to not proceed with that at this point in your life, unless there is a reason why, which most times there isn't a reason other than the person is no longer here or they can't make decisions on their behalf. But for the most part, you don't want to wait. I would say as soon as possible for that. Another thing is that we get a lot of questions for business owners. I am one of them. We always worry about our business. So one of the questions I always get is, how can my business benefit from an estate plan? And having a business and having your own, your livelihood, I should say, connected to what you do every day and to your income every month, there's a lot of assets to protect. If something were to happen to you, if you're a business owner, you may question, what would happen? Who would be in charge? Did you want someone to take over the business? Would you want to close the business? Would you want the person in charge to just take the business and sell it if there's any value to it? Those types of questions are ones that we ask business owners when they think about their plan of what's going to happen to my business. So you can certainly benefit from having an estate plan as a business owner for your business, because you leave, again, instructions for those who are living. And then there's no dispute as to what's going to happen. How do they access things? Those are things that come up when something happens and there's no plan with the business. So one of the really important things that we do, even with clients that don't own a business, is we make sure that you have everything available to your family: passwords, access to accounts. We make sure that your accounts for your business and for your checking, for example, and savings account actually all have the proper person in order so that they can actually access the money, because that is the hardest thing to do when there's no estate plan, is accessing some of the money, some of the documents that people need. And so we certainly work with business owners to do that. And your business will definitely benefit from having that, because again, there is no way to automatically leave it to someone unless it's in writing and it's legal, which is what our job is. So those are the most common questions that I get with estate planning. And I would be delighted if any of you have any questions for me after these live, because it could be something that you personally are dealing with, or perhaps you don't really know where to start. So I'm happy to address your questions at any point. I know that sometimes it seems a little intimidating to ask questions because you don't actually know, what to ask. We do have a website, which you see here at the bottom of the screen. If you wanted to, chat, you can chat with us. You don't even have to call. Some people prefer that. You can chat your question at our website and you can ask any question that you need. And we do offer free consultations in Spanish and in English. If you want to do it in person, we can. We can also do it from the safety of your own home, doing it via Zoom. And that's really all it is. And they're free. And there's nothing wrong with a free 30-minute consultation, as long as you learn something that you may need in your life during that time. So again, any questions or concerns, you can always let me know. And we're always here to help your needs with the estate planning, with real estate as well. If there's any questions regarding probate, we can also help with that matter. But these are very, very important topics that we discuss here, because a lot of times people have it on their mind. I have so many people that come in and say, I'm so worried about this. Oh, it's on my to-do list. Oh, I've been thinking about doing this. And it could be years. Years will go by. But if you don't prioritize your family, you don't prioritize your legacy, it can really cost your family a lot of pain and a lot of money. So that's why a lot of people will do an estate plan. So feel free to drop your questions below during the live, or you can always message us later to see if there's anything that we can help answer with the frequently asked questions. So we'll do a couple of these as we proceed with the Pink Mike Leo Confessions, but feel free to always reach out if you have anything else to add. I want to thank everyone who watched today, and I feel free to talk to you anytime that you guys need. You have my number. You can always call and make an appointment. And we look forward to seeing you here on Tuesdays at 1 o'clock. Thank you for always watching Peak Mike Legal Confessions. We'll see you next week.